So I'm going to start off by just saying that the word narcissist, maybe a lot of you know this, but some of you may not. It actually comes from this Greek mythological figure named Narcissus, who looked at himself in this reflecting pool so many times, and he ended up like falling in and dying. And he was like, he would always be looking at himself because he thought he was so beautiful. So I'm seeing Laura here. I'm seeing Craig here. I'm seeing Lisa here. And all kinds of people. Karen says, I just discovered you. She's in Honolulu. Hi from Las Vegas. Awesome. You know, when I do my webinars, I get people from all over the world, literally all over the world. And so narcissism knows no bounds. And the basic thing about narcissists, yes, they appear to think very highly of themselves, and they can sometimes be very boastful, depending on the type of narcissist you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a covert narcissist, you won't see that as often. But the main thing is that they have no ability to care for others. They have a complete lack of empathy. Something got broken inside of them years and years ago, back when they were children. There was some kind of trauma that happened to them that caused their wiring to be faulty. And they literally have no inner sense of value, and they try to derive all of their value from the external. I see someone from Chicago. Hi from Chicago. Awesome. And I'm seeing Eva saying, thank you, Queen. Love it. I love you guys. And so they have to derive all of their value from the external, and we call that supply. So when we refer to narcissistic supply, we're referring to these narcissists trying to grasp onto whatever they can in order to get that narcissistic supply. I recently had a conversation with Dr. Ramani, which many of you know that she and I have done a lot of collaborating together. And she said they're like rats in a maze. They're really just after one thing, just that cheese. And that's that external sense of feeling of value. And it's like feeding a black hole. And so once they attach themselves to you as their supply, they're literally like leeches. They literally suck the blood out of you because they're trying to suck value for themselves from you. And they often attach themselves to people who are empaths because they know that empaths will feel a lot and care a lot and be very sensitive to their needs. And so you find yourself giving and not receiving anything in return. And so you just are left feeling completely drained from all life itself. So I'm seeing someone from New York, Amber from Maui, Hawaii. I'm seeing all kinds of people. Someone from Maram from Arizona. This is so cool. This is my first YouTube live, and it's really cool to get to actually talk to all of you and see you here. So just know that anything that the narcissist does has really nothing to do with you. They treat you very awfully. They're going to make it about you. They're going to make you think that you're the problem. They're going to project it all onto you like it's your fault. But it's all to do with them and their need for supply. And supply can come from all sorts of places. It can come from having this big house or having a huge bank account or a prestigious job or the right spouse or living in the right community. But supply most often more so comes from making people feel devalued, debased. They judge them. They project their problems onto them. They deflect everything they do or say. They gaslight you, they lie, they manipulate. And all of that is in an effort to protect this fragile little ego that's going on inside of them. And so it's never about you. It's always about them. And that's one of the things that, if you take nothing else from what I say to you in all of my videos, I want you to understand that you cannot take this personally. And I know it's really hard, because so often, the person that you're dealing with, that's the narcissist, is the person that you allowed into your life, that you are the most vulnerable with. It's the person that you're romantically involved with, or it might be, a family member, or, it could be a boss or a business partner or something like that. But whoever it is that's in your life, they only choose targets that they can get to, that they can really figure out what your vulnerabilities are, and then end up using them against you. So it ends up being extremely painful, extremely traumatic, and it is abusive. I mean, whatever form of narcissist you're dealing with, whether it's covert or malignant, or, and I have tons of videos on covert narcissists and all the different forms of narcissists and the kinds of things that they do, but they all have this inability to care for anyone else, which is, hard to figure out when you think that this person has loved you and that you've loved them, right? It's really kind of hard to take and hard to swallow that. So, so I just wanted to just say hi to more of you people. This is so great. I'm loving seeing all of you here. As I said, this is my first YouTube live, so this is really cool for me to actually get to interact with you and be able to have you reach me and me reach you a little bit further. I love it. So I have somebody here from Montreal. So remember that narcissists have 3 different phases to their relationships, which is love bombing, devaluing, and discarding. And I'm actually this week doing a whole series on those 3 phases. So I just did a video which came out yesterday on love bombing. Tomorrow I will be releasing the video on devaluing, and Friday the video on discarding will come out. And they vacillate between the 3 phases. And, so they can be devaluing you and then go back to love bombing you, or even into the discard phase and be love bombing you. And sometimes that's called hoovering, but they can be vacillating back and forth between these 3 phases all the time, because they use all 3 phases as a form of control. They are looking for ways to control you. So sometimes if they've devalued you too much and they realize, oh, maybe I don't want to be in a relationship with this person anymore. Maybe I don't want to give this person the supply that I've been giving them. You don't use the word supply, but in their words, that's how they think of it. Then they start to love bomb you again. Oh, I'm so sorry. Certain narcissists will say sorry, more of the covert ones. But whatever form you're dealing with, they'll go back to love bombing you in whatever way they did in order to get you to move off of that ledge, get you to move off of that position. Come on back, start giving me the supply again. And they use love bombing as a way to get that supply coming their way once again. And so they might promise you something. They might say, oh, I'll never do that again, or whatever, or of course I'll start doing this thing that you want them to do, that you think is really important to you. And they'll give you a lot of lip service. Their lips will move, and they're really, really good at manipulating. I always say they're master manipulators. And then right back to devaluing again. So it's love bomb, devalue, love bomb, devalue. And it's an extremely toxic way to be, because your brain is actually left attached to them. It's a form of trauma bonding, because they go back and forth between these phases. When they're love bombing you, and devaluing you, your dopamine levels end up actually being released in your brain. And so your brain is left craving that dopamine release again, and you become trauma bonded to the narcissist. But just understand that that is not true love at all. I mean, you cannot experience true love with someone who is incapable of loving. So I just want to pop over and see a couple of you guys that are here. I see Louise from Australia. Shout out to you down under. Love it. I have a lot of you guys who tune in for from Australia for me, and I love it. And several of you have bought my program in both Australia and in New Zealand, which is pretty cool. So when you are negotiating with a narcissist, one of the things that you should always remember is, in any negotiation, is that all people want to feel seen, heard, and know that they matter. We all do. We all have, being a narcissist is really sort of like on the end of a continuum of being a human. We all want to feel seen, heard, and know that we matter. The difference is when you're on the narcissism end of the continuum, you cannot see, feel, or have any feelings for other people. You only care about yourself. So we all want to feel validated in some way, and that's what's going on in a negotiation. So the key to negotiating with a narcissist, and this is what I teach in my programs and in my webinars, is how to actually motivate the narcissist into wanting to have a conversation with you. And that key is going to be in your strategy and in your leverage, and in looking at the various forms of supply and figuring out which supply is going to mean more to them to keep than the supply that they get from jerking you around, because they get supply from jerking you around. So when they constantly move the goalpost and you've got letters going back and forth trying to settle your case, and all of a sudden the deal has changed and you think, why did that happen? Well, because they get supply from jerking you around. So creating a strategy and creating leverage that boxes them in is absolutely essential. So for those of you who are out there right now working with a narcissist and trying to resolve a divorce or any kind of a legal matter, and you're trying a collaborative process, you're actually playing into the fact that they are now getting an opportunity to jerk you around more. You're giving them more opportunity to get supply. And remember, that supply is what feeds their ego. It's the oxygen source that they need in order to breathe. It's their breath, basically. And so the only way that you can deal with narcissists is by having a super strong strategy and leverage. And then you want to get the hell out of there.
Narcissistic personality disorder is a personality disorder that affects so many people. And it's a stealth kind of personality disorder that most people don't even understand or see until the evil part of it arrives. These people that have this have no sense of value of other people. They really don't hold anything of value to anybody. They are abusive, and they don't start out that way. They start out extremely charming. They start out where they are sudden soulmates with someone, and most of the time while they're in a relationship, their neighbors, their friends, their coworkers will never see the signs that they are being abusive at home.
Now, Tracy, I know you mentioned on your website and in your podcast that you yourself are a survivor of several relationships with narcissists. And this is what's led you to be so passionate about educating people on the topic. Would you mind sharing a little bit of your personal story? Because I think it will sound familiar to many of our listeners.
Sure. I did not know what narcissistic personality disorder was, or that there were people out there that were this crazy. And yet, when I learned about it because I had been in a marriage, and my divorce was just like the things that kept getting thrown at me, the lies, and now I know them as gaslighting, the things that were coming at me, I didn't understand them at all. So I had just gone through this horrific divorce without a label, without understanding, just really confused as to what the heck happened. And I went into a rather quick relationship after that. I was swooped up by another narcissist, only this one was the reason I came to learn all about this. He had me arrested falsely, which is something that happens a lot with victims, because a narcissist will revert to anything that will kind of take you out of the way, get you out of their hair, and without any care or concern for anyone. So once I started to learn about that, for him, people said, look up gaslighting. He's gaslighting you. I looked it up, and it explained my whole divorce. It explained my mother-in-law, my sisters, my own mother. So there was a reason I didn't see this type of behavior. It was because I grew up with people that would ghost me. And I was used to my sisters just disappearing off the face of the earth for no reason at all. And so when I was in a relationship, that just was like, oh, that's not how normal people are in a relationship. So learning about it and trying to understand it, it put me into this seems like it's a calling for me to stand on the soapbox and never stop talking about it, never stop learning, and never stop teaching about it.
Well, first of all, I just want to congratulate you for not continuing to be in that victim mentality, to see this as a calling, to see this as an opportunity. That's what we really want our entire show to be about, that the divorce and the bad things that happen as a result of divorce are actually opportunities for growth and change. So I'm really... I'm impressed that that's what you see it as, and as a result have obviously helped many, many people. So I want to ask you about the warning signs of narcissists and how you can spot them. But if you could, just before you get to that, just give a little bit of a definition on gaslighting, because I don't know that everyone knows exactly what that is. And you did mention that term. So if you could just give a definition of gaslighting, and then go into what the red flags are for narcissists.
Sure. Gaslighting is a way that they try to manipulate the victim to think they're crazy. That means they're telling you stories that simply didn't happen, and insisting that you're the crazy one, that you don't remember it happening that specific way. So it challenges your mind to really dig deep and question, did that happen? And over time, they slowly wear you down to the point where you are questioning yourself. And most survivors that I talk to just sit there with this dumbfounded look on their faces going, I know that didn't happen, and yet he's convinced me, or she's convinced me over and over, and finally they give up. There's no hope for them, and they just give up the reality that they thought was real, and they've lost themselves. So it feels really icky, if you would say. It feels that you have no control over what's going to happen, and of course you're walking on eggshells during that, because if you say, no, that's not how I remember it, you'll generally be met with anger. You'll be met with the conflict of the story, and they're telling you, no, this isn't how it is, and you're crazy. How could you believe that? How could you, don't you remember? And it's that kind of wearing down of a person that is their intention. There's a great movie from the 1940s called Gaslighting, and if you haven't seen it, it's really creepy with the old music that they used to play in the background, but the man would actually hide things on his wife, and then ask her where her pearl necklace was. And when she would go look for it, she'd be like, oh no, he's going to get so mad at me that I've lost it. But he was like manufacturing this lie, manufacturing her to think that she was crazy. And that's what gaslighting is.
Can I ask, do the narcissists, the people doing the crazy making, coming up with this alternate version of what happened, do they know they're doing it? Is it like is this a plan on their part? I know in that movie, I've seen that movie, and it is fascinating, but that was a very well thought out, plan to make that person think they were going crazy. Do narcissists know what they're doing?
I believe they do, yes, because they're creating this alternate reality. And do they know that they're doing it to mess with your mind? That's to be debated. Do they stick to a story that they believe is true and just push that on? Yes, they do. So I believe that they are doing it intentionally, and there's a maliciousness to it. It's about taking away someone's power. And gaslighting, as all abuse is control. So once they know that they can control you by convincing you of something that didn't happen, then they can control you about every other thing in their life and in your life. So it's a step ladder, if you would, to further and further abuse. If they are not able to mind control you, because that's what gaslighting is, if they're not able to do that, you probably will not be in the relationship very long, because they're looking for someone that they can control. So as soon as you see this reality, which generally happens at the end, at the discard. There's 3 stages of abuse. So it's idealization, and then it's devalue, and after that comes the discard. And most people don't see this kind of behavior until they're out of it, or on the other side looking in going, oh, that's what that was. And so I do believe that they know it and they see it, because it's just, okay, if I can check that box that I got that person to accept this story that I told them, they've got one more step on the control ladder for you.
So back to, I think, Rebecca's question there then. So when someone's getting into a relationship or is in a relationship that's tortured, what are the warning signs or red flags?
Well, there's hundreds of them. There's behavior red flags. There's action red flags. At the beginning, they're certainly different, because the charm that these people have is what captivates everyone. Nobody goes into a relationship going, I want to be with the devil. They just don't. They come into it because the person is everything they've ever dreamed of. And that's part of the red flag kind of abusive behavior, where seems so natural to be sharing your story with the new person in your life, to share every detail that's happened to you before. But what they're doing is they're actually making a list of everything that has happened to you, knowing that they can also get away with it because you didn't see it. So when you're going into a relationship, it's important to know that anyone who rushes intimacy, rushes that relationship. I've heard people get married in 2 months, and it was so whirlwind and it was so amazing. And yet the second they got married, like, the person completely changed. So it's in that stage. If they're not patient with you and not willing to give you the time, that's a sign that they're trying to rush you to confuse you. By rushing someone into something and making them feel so wonderful, on a normal spectrum, that would be a great thing. But on an abusive schedule, that's where they're really just figuring out how to abuse you. And you'll start to see holes in the story. So lies are like gaslighting, lies that just don't make sense. And if they've told you one thing and yet the reality is something else, that's a huge red flag for someone to look at in a relationship. And if they start to isolate you, it's so stealth. You don't really think, oh gosh, he's cutting off my family. But slowly but surely, they pluck off your friends, and they go for the weak ones first. When they meet your friends and your family, they're interviewing them too. How is your alliance? How strong are they going to defend and stick up for you? If your family or your friends say, well, she's a very good storyteller, they're going to use that against you later. So they're gathering intel from your friends. And then if your friends and family can be coerced later into becoming what we call flying monkeys, which is kind of like the witch and the Wizard of Oz used the monkeys to do her bidding. That's what flying monkeys are in a narcissistic kind of relationship. But as you're dating and you're interviewing this person, red flags to look for is are there a lot of crazy people in their life? Is their ex a crazy ex? Are they an alcoholic, drug addict? There's a whole list of things that they will, instantly attach to their ex. That's not normal. If everyone in their past is crazy, probably why would they be there? There's something you have to look at. If they experience and display anger towards you for questioning them, they don't like to be questioned. And of course, in the beginning, you're not necessarily questioning. You're believing that love story. You're not going, well, that doesn't make sense. But if you start to question those things, then and they get angry, that's definitely a sign that you have to watch out for. And if you feel like any single fight could end a relationship, then that's not a good feeling either. That's not something that you should be thinking is a good, healthy relationship.
First, Judy, tell us more about you, more about your background, how you got where you are.
Sure. So just a little bit about my cultural background. I was born in Budapest, Hungary. I'm a survivor of Holocaust parents. And
amazing.
Yeah, and my mission since I was a little girl was to heal the world. I just thought that if I personally don't heal the world is going to blow up. So can you imagine the responsibility?
Oh my
God.
God.
To do something, if I don't do something, everybody's going to blow up. So I think it started somewhere in there at a very early age. And then I, like yourself, had children. I have 2 grown sons and a beautiful grandson, beautiful family. And I think my first experience was with narcissism was that I didn't even know it was narcissism. I thought it was normal, the way my family talked to each other. Basically, here, I'll give you my definition of narcissism. In a nutshell, it's a system gone wrong where the parents put their feelings before the child. I just thought that was normal. So I up to a point, but then I started questioning it. There's something wrong here. And so having had a lot of experience with narcissists, both within my family and in the friendship circle and in various relationships, I soon learned that there was a pattern going on there. And then I got very interested in where that pattern came from and what the blueprint was behind it. And so I was always a kind of a causal thinker. I was more interested in, why is this the way it is? Why are people constantly choosing the same dynamics? Why are they constantly being tripped up by certain insults and certain treatment? So this was an evolution. Back in 2002, I was taking a Kabbalah course.
Oh, that's so funny. I took Kabbalah as well.
You did? Wow.
I did. I studied Kabbalah for a couple of years, actually, in like 2005 to 2007, somewhere around in there.
Okay, well, interestingly enough, I started doodling a little solution to healing global disconnect, and it was following the creation model: creation, destruction, reintegration. And so it became my mind map, and it was meant to heal global disconnect. Never did I think that it would be my psychological model. And I had a plan to launch this global project called Join the Human Race, Healing Global Disconnect. And it didn't quite turn out that way because I didn't have the budget to launch a global project. I didn't know how to do it. And so I thought, okay, it's an interesting model. I think I'll try it on my patients on the micro level. And that's where the mind map that's how the mind map was born. And then the specialty of narcissism evolved because I didn't really know that so many people were injured in this way until I started getting call after call after call, and then the popularity about narcissism, covert narcissism, overt narcissism grew. And then by then people were saying, I'm a mess. I don't know what happened, but I feel completely diminished. What can I do to heal? And
Yeah,
so
I mean, narcissists literally suck the life out of you. I mean, they literally are like leeches.
yes, I call it the vampiring effect.
Yeah. I didn't even realize that until I was dealing with narcissists of my own, but I literally, one in particular that I had to deal with, I felt like was literally draining the life out of me.
Yes.
And I said, it's like a leech, but I
Yep.
had I didn't even have the vocabulary to go, oh, it's an energy vampire, or it's this, or it's that. I hadn't studied anything about narcissism yet. I just knew that that's how I felt.
Well, over time, I developed a vocabulary, and the vocabulary includes words like psychovirus and the vampiring effect and the double dungeon of darkness, where you cannot turn to your mother, you cannot turn to your father. So basically, you're checkmated in your emotions, and so you start degenerating because you don't have the inner strength, you don't have the core sense of self, as you were talking about earlier. We were talking about how this empty shell needs to be fed all the time. So the parents are supposed to do that in the first phase of life, and if that's not done, there's this hollowness and emptiness. And
I just lost you there. Hello.
nobody to turn to. So they
I just want,
basically have
hey,
to suck and
hold on one second, because Judy,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's frozen.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
froze, and so I didn't hear anything after hollowness or emptiness. So if you could just go
Okay.
back. So let me
Yeah.
just go back and start recording again. Okay,
Okay.
go ahead. So
Okay.
there's this hollowness and emptiness.
Yes, I call it a double dungeon of darkness, because how we form our core sense of self, we blueprint off of our parents. They're supposed to give us eye contact, skin contact, attunement, mirroring, breastfeeding, etc. And if we don't get those elements, I call it psychological nutrients. If we don't get those psychological nutrients, then we're not really building that core sense of self. And if we don't have anybody to turn to, then we will start borrowing energy, that vampiring that takes place, and we borrow people's energy because we don't want to, the person doesn't want to collapse inside. And so that's where the other person will feel sucked dry.
And it's such a beautiful way of describing it, because they just have this little inner fragile ego that they just feel like they need to constantly feed externally with this narcissistic supply, and that's how they do it. By pulling it from other people, but it's this black hole. It can never be filled.
That's correct. Right.
And they can never heal. I mean, they can't be rehabilitated.
They can't. What I'm finding is that most people will fire their therapist because they don't want to go there. They don't want to go into the hole in the soul. They've survived that way. It's a very, very difficult journey, because you have to awaken or develop empathy. Without empathy, you can't truly connect to another human being. And so when empathy has been burned out of your system, or never even taught as a model, then then you're operating on a whole new level. Then it's power and control. So you don't have faith in human connection. So if you don't have faith in human connection, let's buy some pretty objects. Let's play with people. Let's use this person or that person to muster up a sense of self. So it's a really, really ugly game. And it ends up breaking down into chaos, defenses, and then the final breakdown, because systems that are not sustainable, as you know, they collapse.
Yeah, and that's the discard phase.
That's the discard phase, correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And during the discard phase, you still see them coming back and love bombing and all that sort of thing, because the love bomb is really a methodology of control that they use.
Yeah, because they just want to put you in formaldehyde. They want you up on the shelf, and then they want Betty or Larry or Henry or whoever all up there waiting for them to reconnect. Because as you mentioned, the other side of the coin is that they often pair with empaths. They often pair with people who have been injured at a causal level, and they too have not received the emotional supplies from their parents, and they have abandonment issues. So when you pull up their abandonment issues, they're very, very ready to hang on again or reconnect with a toxic tie, because love in any form in this particular dynamic is better than no love at all. So they will play on that, and it is really, really disastrous for the person who is involved with the narcissist, because it's a never-ending game until somebody intercepts the game and pulls the plug on the lies and systems gone wrong that make up for this entire dance.
So now let's talk about the difference between silent treatment, no contact, and ghosting. So all three are things that you experience when you're dealing with narcissists. But two of them are done by the narcissist, and one of them is done by you, the victim or the target of the narcissist's abuse or behavior. So let's talk first about silent treatment. So silent treatment is something that the narcissist uses in order to gain control over you. It's something that they do to make you upset, to make you squirm. Remember that the narcissist is doing whatever they can to get control over you, because that gives them a form of narcissistic supply. If you want to know more about narcissistic supply, you should definitely check out my video on narcissistic supply. Basically what it is anything that feeds a narcissist's ego. And I kind of liken it to almost like the tip of the iceberg kind of a thing, because the stuff that feeds a narcissist's ego that you can see on top of the iceberg is the stuff that would feed anybody's ego, because who doesn't like getting compliments or respect or having prestigious, life or friends or a nice house or whatever it is. So those are sort of like the things that first come to mind when people think, oh, feed their ego. That's what they want. They want to, compliments, and they want their ego to be fluffed up in some way. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg, because remember that in some ways, you could say that we all have narcissistic traits or tendencies, but I don't really call it that. I know some people do. I don't really call it that, because a narcissist to me is all the way at the end of the spectrum. It's a person who is pathologically in need of anything that feeds their ego. All human beings want to feel seen, heard, and know that we matter. That's why my book is called Negotiate Like You Matter. When I wrote the book, I didn't specifically address narcissists throughout the entire book. I do reference narcissists some, but when you're dealing with a narcissist, what you're really dealing with is somebody who has no sense of self. They need to get as much out of the people around them as they can, almost like squeezing lemons or sucking blood. You know, that's why sometimes they're called energy vampires. Or I remember when I was dealing with narcissists, I remember feeling like they were leeches. And that was just the only word I could come up with, was like leeches or parasites. And they almost want to become you. And so that's why sometimes you find them like staring at you or watching you. And if you want to know more about that creepy narcissist stare, check out my video on why the narcissist is always watching you, because that's part of what it is that they're doing. They kind of almost want to become you in some ways. So because they have no sense of self. So the rest of that iceberg is the other stuff, what I call the dark underbelly, the part that they don't show the world. And that is that they get narcissistic supply from treating people poorly, from being scary, from intimidating you, gaslighting you, projection, denying, deflection, control tactics, smear campaigns, flying monkeys. It's this whole nasty, toxic stew that you're subjected to, and it becomes really, really traumatic and difficult to get out of once they start that toxic stew formula on you. So that's what's happening when to feed their ego, to feed their need for narcissistic supply. So when they give you the silent treatment, it's actually just a form of trying to control you. So they are stopping talking to you, you know, via text or email or whatever, like they're at work, or maybe you live in separate places, and all of a sudden you can't get in touch with them. And so that they have this, they're giving you the silent treatment, and it's to try to get you to come back and grovel and say, oh, please talk to me. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I was, you know, I shouldn't have said that. You know, they want you to beg to get back into their web of control. And they love that. They love to see you squirm that way. That totally gets them that narcissistic supply that they so deeply that they so deeply crave. And closely related to the silent treatment is ghosting. But ghosting is actually when they're ready to be done and they're just gone. And now all of a sudden you just never hear from them again. And that will happen when they don't feel like there's any source of supply left that they can squeeze out of you. So they just move on to other sources of supply. As long as they think that there is some form of supply for them to squeeze out of you, even if they've long moved on to other sources of supply, they'll come back. And the supply doesn't necessarily mean that they think that you're going to tell them how wonderful they are. It means as long as they think that they can scare you, control you, intimidate you, jerk you around, treat you poorly, make you feel intimidated, all of those things, they will continue to come back into your space. Or maybe just being attached to you in some way gives them some sort of prestige, or just, you know, because maybe you're more powerful than they are, just getting your attention sometimes is all they want. So, but that's when they're coming back and they're hoovering and all that sort of thing. So ghosting just means they're gone and you never hear from them again. And that just means that you're no longer a good source of supply for them. And if you are ready to get out of this narcissistic relationship today, give me a today in the comments. Okay, so now let's talk about going no contact. This is something that you do as the narcissist victim, or the target of the narcissistic abuse. And this is something that you do to protect yourself, to put up boundaries, to stop that narcissistic abuse, to say it's not okay anymore, I'm ready to move on, and I'm ready to take control back of my life. So one is done, ghosting or silent treatment. They're used by the narcissist as a weapon, whereas you are actually using going no contact as a shield, as a barrier, as a protection for yourself, where you're actually just saying, it's not okay anymore. I'm blocking you on my phone. I'm blocking you on my social media. And I don't want to see what you're doing. I don't want you to see what I'm doing. I don't want to interact with you anymore. I want to erase you from the CPU of my life. I don't want to have to deal with you ever again. And that's what I had to do with narcissists in my life. And, I still have to deal with them popping up every once in a while, unfortunately. But I keep up super strong boundaries, and I try to keep it to a very, very bare minimum, which is why I don't even mention who they are in these videos, because I don't want them coming back. I want them to stay away, and I would like to wipe them from the CPU of my life as if they never existed. They never came into my life. They never came into my world. And I highly recommend that you do the same. It is so much better. The air smells cleaner. The sky is bluer. The grass is greener. It's definitely better to get that negative energy out of your space. So that's what it means to go no contact. Okay, so narcissistic supply. I've seen a lot of people ask this question, like, what is supply exactly? You hear this word thrown around. What supply actually is what drives the narcissist, which is anything that feeds their ego. So narcissistic supply can be what you normally think of what feeds people's egos, like having a big house or having lots of money or a prestigious job or the right wife or husband or living in the right community and all of those things that make you feel more important, than other people. Those are all external sources of supply. But the other way that they get supply is through what I call devaluing, debasing, judging, degrading people, controlling people, intimidation tactics, gaslighting, all those sorts of things are also a way that narcissists get supply. So understand that the narcissist is a very fragile, broken person inside. And everything they do is to cover up the fact that there's this teeny little thing inside that decided long ago, long before you ever came into the picture, when they were maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, that the world is not a great place. They can't trust the world. It was either because they experienced some sort of trauma. It may have been that they were neglected in some way, abused in some way. I've even read things that overindulged children can become narcissists as well. But the bottom line is that they end up with no sense of inner value. So they believe that they only get value from the external world and that they have to manipulate it. They have to lie about it. They have to manipulate it. And that nobody cares about them. And so they don't really care about anybody else. And in fact, if you try to care about them, they eventually end up punishing you because there must be something wrong with you for caring about them, because they have no inner sense of value. They have a very, very fragile sense of self. So in a divorce situation, you will see that injury, you're far into the discard phase. And if you haven't seen my videos on the 3 stages of a narcissistic relationship, I highly recommend you go back and watch those. So it's love bombing, devaluing, and discarding. And I have 3 different videos on each of those sections of their relationship, but they all interplay all the time. They can be love bombing as they're devaluing, or love bombing as they're discarding, or even as you're discarding. So they go back and forth between these phases. But what happens during the discard phase is you start to see the birth of the smear campaign. And that's when you start to see them lining up their flying monkeys, and they have the triangulation and all that stuff is going on. And I did my Narcissism 101 last week was on flying monkeys. So if you want to know more about them, go check out that video as well. But basically, when you are dealing with them in a divorce, they are in full-on attack mode, because when you're dealing with a narcissist, you're either for them or against them. So in a divorce situation, you're clearly against them. So they go on full-on attack mode, and they start wanting to get you first, and they start doing all kinds of things to try to manipulate you. And here's the key when it comes to divorcing a narcissist and dealing with supply. The thing is that you have to figure out, if you want to try to settle your case, and I just did a coaching call with somebody on this morning, if you want to settle your case, then you need to figure out what form of supply means more to them than the supply that they get from jerking you around. The problem is that you, as a reasonable person, are trying to resolve a case or resolve differences or issues like a normal person. You think, what can we do to get to a place of being done with this case? Or how do we resolve this in a way that we each get something that's fair? Or what does the law say? Or something like that. Like, you look at all of those things. They don't look at that. I mean, they'll tell you that they do, but what it really comes down to is, what are they getting out of this deal? And if what they're getting is not more important to them than the supply that they get from jerking you around, then they will continue to jerk you around. For those of you out there who have been dealing with narcissists in a case for years, or even just dealing with them for years, if they're still in your life and they're still jerking you around, then that means that they are still getting some amount of supply. They enjoy watching you squirm. They enjoy watching you get emotional. They get off on that, and they get supply from that. That's their food. That's their oxygen. That's what they breathe. That's what they live on. Like, without that, they feel like they have no sense of self. That's how they get their sense of self. It's totally screwed up, but that's the truth. That's what it is. That's what narcissistic supply is. So when you're dealing with them in a divorce situation, or even a dissolution of a business relationship, or even if you're dealing with a family member or a neighbor or somebody in your life who's a narcissist, you have to understand that they get supply from making your life miserable. So you have to figure out what supply source is going to be more important to them to keep than the supply source that they get from making you miserable. So hoovering is actually a form of love bombing that takes place during one of the other phases. So it could be, it's usually the discard phase. And during this discard phase, where the narcissist might feel that they're losing control. So remember, love bombing is a form of controlling the victim. It's a form of getting that person into their web of control. I always say their layer of control, into their web. And so that it's a form of manipulation so that they can control you. And if they feel that sense of that grip loosening, that their grip of control is loosening because of the discard phase. Maybe you've hired a lawyer. Maybe you've talked to other people. Maybe they sense that you don't care that much about them anymore. That's when you start to see the hoovering start in. That's when they start to come back. They start love bombing you. They start saying things like, oh, come on, you know, we've always been so good together, or we can work this out, or, you know, you don't need to worry about that. You know, I'll always have your back, things like that. As a lawyer, what I see people doing a lot of times is they'll come in when the person's hired the lawyer and say, oh, you don't need that lawyer. We can work this out. We've always been so good at working things out. We've always been good at talking to each other, or something to that effect. But what hoovering is they are coming back and love bombing because they feel that their narcissistic supply source is being threatened in some way. And they get supply from controlling you. They get supply from jerking you around. They get supply from anything that feeds their ego. So does this relate to brothers and sisters too? Absolutely, it does. And I see Dee Dee here from Germany. Awesome. Awesome. Hello in Germany. My mom is German. My dad is Chinese. So I love my German people and my German roots. Awesome. So, and yes, as Renee says, it can be anybody. So yeah, these apply to anyone. So hoovering happens when the narcissist senses that their control is loosening. And so they come back and they start to love bomb again to try to get that control back again. So they go back to the tool that they used in the beginning to get you into their lair to begin with. So, you know, it might be that they're horrible to you, but then they turn around and say, oh, you're so beautiful, or, you know, make you a smoothie or whatever. But behind your back, they're, you know, stabbing you in the back, or they are smearing you, or they are. And so it can be very, very confusing when you're dealing with a narcissist, because, you know, on the one hand, they seem like they're horrible to you and they're doing all these horrible things to you, but then the things that are coming out of their mouth are not matching how they're behaving, but they know what to say. Narcissists are great at manipulating. They've spent thousands and thousands of hours honing their skills of manipulation. And they're especially good at knowing how to manipulate their targets or their victims. They've studied you. They know what your weaknesses are. They know what things they know what you want to hear. So they'll come back and say the things that they need to say in order to get you to come off of what it is that you are, you know, that you're talking about, just to get you to stop. So they'll love bomb you just enough to get you back into that web of control. And a lot of times it's like just to get you off of whatever it is that you're thinking. Maybe you're accusing them of cheating. Maybe you're accusing, and so they'll deflect so that you're not looking at that anymore, and start love bombing you in that way as well. So let's see. So I say, hi, everyone. Hi, Rebecca. All right. So, and remember that on Tuesdays, I do my Ask the Attorney Anything sessions, which I always have tons of great questions on that. So that's Tuesdays at noon. So I've committed to going live twice a week at noon Pacific time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And on Tuesdays, I do my Ask the Attorney Anything sessions, which I also do, by the way, in my 3 must-have secrets to communicating with a narcissist free webinar that I offer several times a week. And I know lots and lots of you have attended that, and I get to see a lot of you there as well. So there will be a sign up for that free webinar in the comments in this video as well, once we put it up on YouTube. So if you want to participate in that, come on over and join me in that. And that is also free. So, you know, there's somebody saying that he wants to hurt you. Yeah, I mean, so the bottom line is they only use this hoovering technique to try to get you back into their web of control. It's not, they're not actually, it's so confusing because it's not actually to make you feel better, or it's not anything that has anything to do with you, because it never really does when it comes to narcissists. It only has to do with them. And they use it as a tool as a tool of manipulation. So, and I often see it with when in the discard phase as the divorce is starting or something like that. But remember, when with the narcissistic relationship, it's love bombing, devaluing, and discarding. But it's not love bomb, then devalue, then discard. It goes. It starts off with love bombing, but they can be love bombing as they're devaluing, love bombing as they're discarding. And that's what hoovering is. So that's the term of the day with hoovering. And, and all forms of narcissists do this, whether it's the covert narcissist or the grandiose narcissist or the overt, overt as grandiose. Or the malignant narcissist, they all use this tool of hoovering in order to get the person that they have targeted to not look at their bad behavior and only be back into being a form of supply for them, because that's what you serve for them, is giving them a source of narcissistic supply. Remember, supply is anything that feeds their ego. It could be normal things that feed people's egos, such as money and compliments and those sorts of things. But what narcissists need is an endless amount of other supply too, which is devaluing people and discarding people and debasing people, making people feel bad, jerking them around. So remember that when you're going to negotiate with a narcissist, you are not coming from the same place. You, reasonable person, are looking for a reasonable outcome. Narcissist person is looking to feed their ego. So if jerking you around helps to feed their ego, then they will continue to do that for as long as they need to. And that's why it's really, really hard to settle cases with narcissists. And that's why I created my slave program, which I know a lot of you have participated in as well. And trauma bonding is an interesting thing. It's like, how can you feel bonded to a person who has abused you? And that's basically what trauma bonding is. And I've seen it so often in my practice. I recently had a meeting with a client who I'd helped him with his divorce. And now he has a girlfriend who is very, very abusive to him. His now ex-wife is actually trying to get the children back from him or reduce his time sharing because of how toxic his girlfriend is. And here he is facing the prospect of potentially losing his children, or at least having his time sharing be very much reduced. And yet he still cannot give up this girlfriend. I mean, he's just so trauma bonded to her. And how can you be trauma bonded to a person who has been abusive to you? Well, the first time that I saw an explanation about that was in this book, which I've done a whole video about the covert passive aggressive narcissist and this book. So if you haven't checked that out, go check out that video that I've done, and I'll drop a link to that below. But in this book, Debbie Mirza talks about the concept of intermittent reinforcement. And that's what happens when you're dealing with narcissists. You get this intermittent reinforcement. And I talked about that in the 3 separate videos that I did on the different stages of a narcissistic relationship, which is love bombing, devaluing, and discarding. And so you start off with love bombing, and you're getting this love bomb, love bomb, love bomb. And then they start devaluing, but then they go back to discarding, and or love bombing, devaluing, love bombing, devaluing. And sometimes it's love bombing during the discard phase too. So it's kind of like love bombing at the beginning and then discarding at the end. And in between, it's a toxic stew of disaster, a vortex of craziness. So, but what happens is, according to a psychologist named Robert Sapolsky, he talks about how these monkeys were tested and they were only given treats intermittently. And if they got a treat every single time, the dopamine levels in their brain didn't do anything, nothing happened. But if they got a treat intermittently in a variable way where they didn't know when they were going to get the treat, then the dopamine levels rose in their brains to the level of cocaine. So in other words, they get this pleasure release just because of the anticipation that they might get the treat. And so that's what's happening in our brains when we become trauma bonded to this person. You actually become addicted, according to these professionals, to the need for their love bomb. You want to believe that, and you become kind of codependent on them in that sense. And so that's what trauma bonding is, and that's what makes it so difficult to get out of the relationship and become like, okay, like I teach you how to develop a strategy and create leverage. And I just did a video on leverage. If you haven't checked it out, go check that out. But if you haven't been used to being on the offensive, it's so foreign to you to even think about, geez, I can think about something for myself. And part of the reason why it's so hard is because of this trauma bonding and this effect on your brain. Your brain literally becomes like scrambled eggs or something because you're so bonded to this person. So I just want to take a second and read a couple of your comments. I see Leah from Missouri, and I see, Micah is calling, watching me from a hot tub in Merritt Island, Florida. How awesome is that? Isabella from Poland. Ashley says, I really feel for people who have no knowledge of this and are judged by their loved ones. And that is so true. I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people just say, why don't you leave? Why don't you just get out? And I know sometimes from my own perspective as a divorce lawyer, I'm looking at people going, why in the heck would you be staying? And it wasn't until I understood this concept of trauma bonding that it made it so much more clear to me why people don't leave, why they feel almost addicted to staying. And I actually even spoke with a client this morning who was all ready to leave because she had found out that, it looked like her husband had been cheating and had been withholding a lot of information from her, which is, a lot of typical narcissistic behavior. And yet, he found out that she knew some things and that she was potentially going to leave. And she said, oh my God, he's been so wonderful this whole weekend. And this week he's back to the man that I married. He's sending me flowers. This guy's love bombing her big time to get her back under his web of control. And even as she's telling me this, that, maybe she might want to do a postnuptial agreement instead of a divorce and things like that, she's also saying to me, gosh, his words don't match his actions. And she's still saying, hey, basically this guy is still exhibiting all these narcissistic traits. But the love bombing is like drawing her back in. He's using all the right words that he knows that he needs to use in order to get her back into his web of control. So it's very difficult sometimes to think about, gosh, I can leave this person and I can be okay. They want you to think that you're not going to be okay without this person. I mean, they spent a lot of time working your brain to make you dependent on them and think that you're nothing without them, and think that you can't, that the world is going to be against you. Think that everybody else thinks that they're wonderful and you're the one that's crazy. They do this number on you. It's almost like deprogramming your brain from being in a cult in a lot of ways. So, I see somebody here from Sydney, Australia, and I see Terry saying they destroy your every out. Well, they do try to, but there's always a way out. I actually was just coaching a guy this past week who is dealing with a narcissistic business partner. And he was like, I just don't see a way out. And I told him there's always a way out. There's definitely always a way out. It's just feeling that strength and understanding what's going on with your brain. Because once you understand that and you go, okay, it's really hard for me to leave because I'm dealing with trauma bonding here. This is what's happened to my brain. And once you start having that realization and you can see it and you can name it, then it makes it so much easier for you to recognize the signs when they're happening and start to pull away from it and not have it be controlling you as much as it had been in the past. So I said, oh, what was that other option other than divorce? So you can always do a post-nuptial agreement. You know, what I was referring to in my particular client's case is that she had a prenuptial agreement, and we were talking about the possibility while he's in the love bomb phase of taking advantage of that, ethically manipulating the manipulator, and seeing if he would be willing to renegotiate the prenup into a postnuptial agreement that would afford her a little bit more financial stability if she ever did decide to leave him. So that's what I was talking about. So Karen Smith says, Hoover in progress, trauma bond broken. That's so good to know. That's so good to know. So once you start to recognize it, oh, they're hoovering. Oh, I see what's going on here. Oh, I'm feeling pulled back in because of my trauma bonding. You know, it's so much easier to start, you know, stepping back and seeing it as almost like an outsider would, rather than the emotional aspect of it. Flying monkeys are a big part of what narcissists use, and especially when you're looking at negotiating with narcissists, which is what I specialize in, they use their flying monkeys for all sorts of things. So what is a flying monkey and why do they need them? What do they use them for? So a flying monkey is a third party. They could have one or they could have multiples of these flying monkeys, but it's a third party that narcissists use to inflict abuse upon their target. So they're lining up these people to try to help them abuse you. And most often the flying monkeys really have no idea that they're being used as a pawn in their whole entire scheme to try to make you, the target, feel worse. So while I'm going to go a little bit more into the flying monkey thing, I just wanted to run over here and give a little check and see where you guys are calling in from and who we have here. So and remember that I'm going to do the Q&A again on Tuesday at noon. So you'll want to make sure that you check that out as well. But if you guys have any stories about flying monkeys, I'd love to hear that, and just go ahead and give that to me in the chat. So I'm checking that out now. So I see somebody here from London. Hi, Sully from Florida. Deborah from Arkansas. Thanks for joining in on me. So I want to hear, have you guys been dealing with flying monkeys? So flying monkey, the term actually came from the Wizard of Oz. And the wizard in the Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch had her flying monkeys around her when she was in her like little lair or whatever she was in. And they didn't really have any thought. They just lined up with the Wicked Witch. And so that's what narcissists do. They line up these people so that you, the target, either think that you're the only one that thinks this way, because that's one of the things that narcissists use to kind of control you, is to say you're the only one that thinks that. And so they will line up these flying monkeys to believe what they believe, so that it reinforces the fact that you're the only one that thinks that way. You're the only one that believes that. You're the only one that doesn't see how great they are. You're the only one that doesn't see how generous they are. You're the only one that doesn't have respect for them. That sort of thing. So they either are lined up and aligned with the narcissist and just thinking that the narcissist person is wonderful, or they are being used in a sense that they also think that there's something wrong with you. So they try to turn these people against you. And very often they use people that they know like you, or or that you like, or that you respect. And sometimes they'll even have this person, like it could be somebody close to you. Like, you know, when I was dealing with a couple of narcissists in my life, you know, one of the narcissists actually had my cousin come to me and say, you know, oh, why don't you try to give her a chance? And, you know, obviously my cousin didn't know the whole story of what was going on. And so here my cousin is being used as a pawn in this whole narcissistic scheme to try to abuse. And just looking to see how many of you have been dealing. So Annie says, I've been dealing with exes and flying monkeys related to parental alienation, and he is the narcissist. Exactly. So they line you up, their narcissists up to think that you are a bad parent, you know, and sometimes they start this whole campaign of denigration against you long before the divorce happens. You know, sometimes they start planting these seeds, you know, many months and sometimes even years before you're even onto the idea that divorce may even be an option. So they might start saying things like, oh, you know, so-and-so had a little too much to drink at the party last night. You know, I'm really worried about her. And this is like maybe 6 months before the divorce even gets started. So that once the divorce starts, that person can go, well, I told you that she had a problem with alcohol. And then they start trying to use that against you as, obviously, you're not a fit mother because you have a problem with alcohol. Everybody knows that. You know, I just had a conversation with Carol down the street. She was concerned about you because of your drinking problem. And you're sitting there thinking, you know, I have 1 glass of wine a week. I don't even know what you're talking about. That sort of thing. So that's the kind of thing that they'll do with their flying monkeys. They use them in their pawn, as a pawn in their overall scheme of psychological abuse. And during a divorce or even a breakdown of a partnership or any kind of situation where you're trying to separate yourself with a narcissist, and especially if you're getting ready to go negotiate with a narcissist, they are going to want to use these flying monkeys as a method of leverage against you, so that you feel more scared, so that they take more control over the negotiation process. So I'm just looking to see what some of you guys are saying. Anne says that's exactly what he does. Lizzie says, my employees are flying monkeys for my narc husband, so sick. Well, and the employees for a narc husband are a perfect place because they're being paid by that guy. So it behooves them to say, oh, what's going on? You know, okay, we'll line up and go get behind the person who we are employed by. So now, even if you had a great relationship with your husband's employees, you know, they're like, well, I know my bread is buttered on this side, so sorry, can't talk to you. And then it makes you feel even more alone, more victimized, more isolated, more crazy. It's a method of gaslighting, because, you know, here comes these third parties who are saying things to you about what happened in a particular situation, and you know it didn't happen that way. So you're being gaslighted now, or gaslit, by a third party. So these are like the minions, the henchmen of the whole narcissistic play. And when you are separating from a narcissist in a divorce or a business setting, it even gets worse. It's like they're on steroids. Whatever their worst case scenario was before, it's 100,000 times worse when you're trying to separate out from them, because when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's you're either for them or you are the enemy. I mean, even when you're in a relationship with them, the slightest little slight is a massive, huge thing, you know, and it all becomes about, you don't respect me, you don't love me, you don't do enough for me, all this stuff. And all you did was say, hey, how come you didn't take out the trash or whatever? It becomes this massive, huge thing. So just imagine now they are no longer getting this narcissistic supply from you, that whatever it was that they felt they were getting from you and why they were in a relationship with you in the first place, that supply source is being threatened. So now they're just coming after you, and they come after you not just themselves, but try to line up people so that they feel that they're bolstering up their ego. And I have this whole army of people who believe what I believe, who think that you're crazy, that I'm amazing, and that you're the one that has the problem. So it's a method to make you feel even worse. So I just volunteered for an insanity test. I go in on Thursday. I'm taking them all to court. Well, you know, taking them to court is probably a good way of turning around that. Remember, I talk about how you want to make sure you're going on the offensive when you're dealing with narcissists. If you are in a situation where you're divorcing a narcissist, or you're trying to dissolve a business partnership or negotiate with a narcissist in any format, you're going to constantly feel like you're on the defensive, constantly feel like they're coming after you. And all you can do is like deal with that fire and that fire and that fire and that fire. And you don't stop to breathe. It's almost foreign to you to think, oh, I can actually have a strategy here and turn this around. I can actually go on the offensive and have them be the one defending themselves. It's such a foreign concept, because throughout the entire relationship, they've tried to exert this coercive control over you and have you almost believing, like as if you're in a cult or something, like that you can't ever get what you want. You can never turn this around. And I'm here to tell you that you absolutely can. They can have 100 flying monkeys, a whole army of people outside. It doesn't really matter. What matters is what happens in that negotiating room. And when you go in to mediate your case, or you go in front of a judge, they're not going to have all these flying monkeys in there unless they want to parade 100 witnesses in there. But you can also parade witnesses in, you know, and trial gets expensive. So I do highly recommend that you try to have enough leverage that you can use in settlement discussions. But even if I've seen cases settle at lunchtime at trial. So even if you have to wait to use your leverage until you get to trial, you can still definitely turn it around. Never think that it's too late for you. You know, always try to turn it around as much as you possibly can. So I just want to check out a couple more of your comments. Catherine says you're awesome. Thank you, Catherine. I think you are so awesome too, and I'm so glad that you're here. So, all right. Well, very similar to Scientology. I mean, it is a form of brainwashing, if that's what you mean as far as the Scientology. I mean, I don't know that much about Scientology, so I don't want anyone to think that I'm besmirching Scientology, but I'm assuming that that's what you are saying. I mean, it is a form of brainwashing what they do, because they are trying to get some form of control over you. So John says, explain supply. I am going to explain narcissistic supply in one of my next ones of these, but just very briefly, I'll just say that narcissistic supply is anything that feeds the narcissist's ego. So it could be money, compliments, it could be exerting control, devaluing, judging, debasing people, putting them down, all that sort of thing. Anything that feeds the narcissist's ego. So that's my explanation today about flying monkeys. Beware of flying monkeys. Beware of flying monkeys everywhere, especially on social media and places where even if you've blocked your ex on your social media accounts, beware of the flying monkey minions who are out there lurking about, watching what you're doing. And also be careful about who you're talking about the narcissist to, because they have spies everywhere. So, and remember that everything you do or say could potentially be a trial exhibit. So you want to be super careful about making sure that you're the one if you end up in front of a judge wearing the white hat and the other narcissist is the one that has all the issues.